Hello guys, this is Angela Sung, and you are listening to another episode of the Warrior Painters podcast. Like many of us here in the United States, our minds have been occupied by a series of ongoing events. We believe that it's extremely necessary to show support against racism and injustice, and at the same time, it's also very important to find ways to take care of our physical health and mental health during this tough time. Today we invited two artists to share their personal stories and how they made peace with their depression. We also have invited a doctor, who is a friend of ours, to talk about his experience treating patients with depression and other mental illnesses. Please know that we are not here to offer any medical suggestions, and you should always seek professional help on your own if needed. No doctor-patient relationship of any kind is formed if you choose to listen to this podcast. All right, to start off, we'll have the guests introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Catherine Lamb. I'm an illustrator. I'm based in New York. I mostly do editorial, though I do want to go into animation and stuff. The topic today is about mental health. I haven't truly been diagnosed because I don't really have the funds to go see a therapist or a psychiatrist. But I feel like I kind of know my own truth, which is that I am very depressed, as you can probably see through my art. Yeah, especially with what's going on this week, I think mental health is a really big issue that we really need to address.
Oh, hi, I'm Larry. You guys have heard me before. I do art from all over the place. Mainly, I draw a lot of monsters online, but they kind of help me deal with some of the stuff. I'm on here today because I've dealt with depression.
Hi, Brent DeVera. I am a primary care physician, board certified in family medicine, based in Las Vegas, Nevada. And that's about it.
Okay, cool. Well, before we begin our really, really serious topic, can you guys tell me a little bit about what you wanted to be as a kid and how that kind of changed as you grew up? Larry, we could skip you this time because I know you wanted to be a shark. So, let's focus on Catherine and Brent.
Well, when I was young, I kind of wanted to be a vet because I could just pet dogs. But I realized that more goes into it than that. So I kind of gave up on that dream. I kind of wanted to do art around middle school because I was a huge weeb. I really wanted to get into art and stuff. And yeah, here I am now.
So that's really funny. Cool. How about you, Brent? Did you always want to be a doctor?
Absolutely not. No. I had a lot of interests when I was a kid. I knew right away that I couldn't be a basketball player because I'm short. Yeah, 5'7". That's just not. It's not going to cut it. But I actually did. I was really interested in drawing when I was a teenager. Had a whole binder full of drawings and stuff. But I guess I was very much a realist, and I really didn't feel like that could earn me a lot of money with the amount of talent that I had. So my mom told me to be a doctor, so I did.
Well, you're a really good doctor, so good choice. Okay, well, let's maybe start off with some personal stories of how you guys felt depression and how you kind of deal with it and some of your personal life details. I could start off with myself. Basically, I have been diagnosed with depression. I don't know what it's called, but it's not the constant type. And then I definitely have really bad anxiety. I have been seeing a therapist to try to work on it, but it's really difficult sometimes for me to draw and paint without feeling like constant shit. And I don't know if any of you guys could relate to that.
Yeah, I totally relate. When it's been so incredibly hard to just focus and work on art. When I first felt depressed, I guess, when I was 14 in high school. And living was just really hard, but I found a lot of comfort in drawing. But when I decided to make drawing and art my career decision, it just kind of crumbled afterwards. It became the source of my stress. Trying to work, trying to make art, trying to make new ideas became so difficult. I would just sit in front of my computer and just stare at it for 6 to 8 hours a day, just trying to force myself to work. But I was paralyzed, being unable to do anything at all. If that makes any sense. I don't know if you
Yeah, I think I definitely have. Have you, Larry? Because I do feel like once art becomes a job, it feels extremely different than it being for fun.
Yeah, I definitely relate with that. I think when you're drained from your creativity, it just kind of just takes away from sometimes from the desire to be creative just for creative sake, and you get exhausted. But as for me, the story behind how I recognized my depression, actually, Brent was actually there. There was a few months where I was just feeling really, really down, like not necessarily sad, but just lethargic and kind of lost. Brent and his wife invited me up to Vegas to just come over and just stay at their place for a while. And I was talking to Brent on a drive one day, just asking about like his wife, because she's confessed to me that she's been through depression. So I asked him, like how did she deal with it? What did she go through? Just asking him questions, being inquisitive. And what I didn't realize at the time was like he started asking me all these questions about myself. It's like, have you been really tired lately? Have you lost interest in the things that you've done? And he just went through this laundry list of questions that I realized later on they actually asked you at the doctor's office. But he was just asking me as a friend. I didn't realize it. And then we just kind of driving. He's like, oh yeah, it sounds like you're depressed. And I was like, oh, okay. And then like we would just sit there, and then we kind of like I just kind of thought about it, but then like we talked about ways to kind of overcome it. But at the time, there was a big fear where you realize that you're depressed, but then like it's something that a person of my personality type would never think that I would ever have. I was known around as the positive guy, the go-getter, the guy who feels like, okay, well, you just got to dig yourself out of that hole, you can do it, Having like a professional actually tell me that I possibly had it, and eventually I found out later on I did have it, was the game changer for me. I realized I was so close-minded at a certain point. Just being positive doesn't mean you're right.
Okay, I think this is like a good segue into our next question. And for you guys, so Catherine, I know you said you didn't have the funds to see a therapist or anything. And for Larry, you were diagnosed by Brent. But Catherine, how did you start to begin to recognize that you have depression?
I kind of go through periods of depression, like bouts of depression, I guess is what you call it, where I have a couple of years where I'm really depressed. And usually it's because I'm in like a situation that I'm not happy in. And usually like the most telling signs, obviously, that I get like a lot of suicidal thoughts. And another is that I completely don't really see a point in like life anymore. Like everything becomes so tedious and so draining. Like it just sucks the life and enjoyment out of everything. I talked about like how art used to be something that I loved so much, but after being really depressed for so long, it just completely sucked all enjoyment out of it. It just became a job. And I feel like with art, it's definitely something that I especially went into to have fun with. But after seeing that it became just another thing that I had to do just to get money, just to get by, it became such a chore to do. And I guess that's another thing that makes me realize that I am depressed, is when I can't find meaning in anything anymore. Even the things that I found significant once in my life, it's just like I could quit tomorrow and then just wouldn't affect me emotionally. Yeah. So
I'm relating to this so hard right now. So Brent, like, do you have anything to add onto that, or things that people should watch out for if they start having these thoughts?
Yeah, so from a clinical and academic perspective, there's a kind of a laundry list, like Larry mentioned, of things to look out for. Now, I think it is important to go through that list. Before I go through that, though, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that everyone is different. Your depression is not the same as someone else's depression. So this is just kind of a guide, we're not trying to check off lists. We're trying to take a look at the whole picture. But this kind of helps us out. So the main symptom to look out for is that depressed mood. So that's kind of the stereotypical depression, is when you're just feeling sad overall. Now, what I've noticed in practice is that many times, actually oftentimes, that's not present, or people don't recognize that sad mood. And it may be because of a cultural thing, because I work with a lot of Hispanics. A lot of the Hispanics from Mexico have been through so many hard times that they don't really recognize depression as a valid thing, like it doesn't exist. So we should pay attention to the other things that I'm going to list off here. So one of the other things is a symptom called anhedonia. which basically means that the things that you found pleasure in the past are not giving you pleasure anymore. And you're having a hard time finding happiness in the usual spots. So that's one. So your sleeping pattern can change. You can go either way. Either you're not able to get sleep or you're sleeping too much. So it can go either way. Also, your appetite can change. That can also go either way. You can have so little interest in eating that you're not eating at all, or you turn to food as an escape. So you end up eating a lot more than usual. As Larry mentioned, you can have low energy. And we don't really know how to explain that physiologically, but that's a pretty common sign of depression or anxiety. Also, having difficulty thinking, concentrating, problem solving. You're just your mind is kind of in a cloud when it comes to logical thinking like that. Feelings of guilt, and a lot of times it has to do with things that happened to you in the past, traumatic experiences. There are so many people out there who have had traumatic childhoods. Molestation is a huge thing, and nobody talks about it, but I face it all the time with my patients, and those things can contribute to these feelings of guilt, to feelings that you're worthless, things like that. And also, when it gets really bad, you start to have thoughts about harming yourself, whether it be for attention or for actually ending your life. That's when we really need to step in and get and change things.
Thanks for that, Liz. So I do have some two questions that I would like to ask to add on to those. So you mentioned trauma and how they could change your perception of how people interpret depression. Then how would you be able to diagnose that if you don't even know, like what you were saying earlier?
Yeah, again, everyone is different. You really, with my job, I really have to work with different personalities, and some people respond to actual paper evaluations. So I tend to use that a lot. There's a screening tool called PHQ-9. You can Google that. It's a screening tool. It kind of gives a number to those symptoms that I listed. And, based on the number, the higher the number, the more likely you are to have depression or anxiety. There's actually a separate one for anxiety called GAD-7. So a lot of people look at that. I present that number to them, and they say, "Oh, okay, maybe I do." And for people who don't accept that number, it's a lot of just kind of talking about it, and following up, and kind of letting them see. So I ask questions like, "Well, have your family members or friends, have they mentioned anything, or has your boss, or is it affecting your work in any way?" So once they start thinking about that, and maybe comparing how they were 10 years ago to how they are now, kind of gives them that, oh, wait, maybe things have changed.
Okay, cool, thanks. And I'll save my second question for later, but I wanted to ask you two, Catherine and Larry, what do you feel like are some of the reasons that artists fall into depression?
Questioning my self-worth as an artist, constantly wondering if I'm good enough for this industry, usually send me personally triggering into a spiraling down of depression. The common thought that I always have, and I feel like a lot of people relate with this, is like, if you're out of work for a while, or you're not getting the jobs you want, or your career isn't the way it goes, you have a bleak outlook of the future, right? And so like all these things are intertwined. Like I feel like I have to have a really good career in order to have some sort of relationship, because a lot of people, when they go dating, the main thing they're looking for is, oh, I want to be with a partner who is stable. So when you don't have that, you think, okay, well, you can feel alone and feel kind of worthless in that aspect where, okay, nobody wants to date me because I'm like a underemployed artist or whatever, right? And sometimes even unemployed. You're constantly comparing yourself to others, where you're seeing other artists, your peers, get better. And you know in your mind that in order for you to achieve some of the goals that you find your more successful friends have, you got to work hard towards that. But then your desire to work is just not there. So you know that, okay, I got to work this hard to get there. But like there would be constantly times where I'm picking up my pen and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do this. And maybe like 1 or 2 minutes in, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to take a nap first. I rush to my bed, I take a nap. And I'm like, why am I constantly doing this? I don't understand. I know I got to do these things. was like, I hate myself. These are the people I used to criticize for being lazy. And I didn't realize that there's certain things that are just out of your control, that the motivation, that drive is completely gone. It's like building, it's just like thing after thing that builds on top of each other that just sends you, or at least myself, spiraling down, where you feel kind of hopeless as an artist. And you're like, the thoughts I constantly thought to myself was, well, it's too late. I cannot beat this. So what's the point of living? Like, I never thought about like killing myself, but the constant thought that always ran through my head when I was severely depressed, like, I wish an asteroid would come and destroy the world. And like, I just
don't take us out with you. Okay?
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. I'll suffer together, and when we realize it happened. I'm not trying to justify it, but these are the thoughts that I had. But it's kind of cool too, because we're like dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just cool. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I totally agree with what you said. I feel like making art and being an artist and sort of like a point of pride for everybody, and it's almost like a way people like use to identify themselves. Like, a lot of people identify as, oh, I'm an artist, so when you kind of like attach value into something external that isn't about yourself, and you start to see like your art career, for example, like kind of not go exceed the expectations that you want, that's like kind of, it hits your own self-esteem, your own confidence. And like, if you only attribute your value to something like your job, if your job's not working well, then you're going to totally think that you're completely worthless, that like something's wrong with you, that you're not like a good artist, you're not a good person, you're just like, it's like, what's the point? Why do I suck so much, I guess? I mean, I had this severely because like in college, the way the program, at least in my college, was set up was very competitive, and they kind of like pit you against your peers. And, like there is like favoritism among the teachers where like they obviously would favor the kids who draw better. Then they kind of like almost rank you by like how important you are based on how good your art is. So when I graduated and got into started working for editorials and stuff, like obviously when it comes to freelancing, work comes a little slow when you're first starting off. That like just beat my confidence down. I was basically like, I thought I was like not bad, so why am I not getting any work? Because I attribute all this, like all my value, all my self-esteem, all my confidence to my job. And like once my job wasn't working, it was just like, I just like fell down like a deep like rabbit hole. Mm-hmm. It was like, my work isn't going well. I'm not going to get hired. I'm such a failure. I'll never have money in my life. Oh, my mom was right. And it's like tunnel. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of just like the starting point for most artists is like a little downfall.
It's shocking because both of you guys are really great. So, I mean, I feel like most artists do have to go through this, but it's really painful. How do you guys then like cope with your depression as an artist, like in terms of like unemployment, relationship problems, when you feel like you plateaued, or like the cycles of depression as well?
I feel like at a certain point, when it comes to like unemployment or like relationship problems, like all of those things can only be fixed if you fix the main issue at hand. Obviously with unemployment, I just had to like do more work and email more people, and with relationship problems, I either had to like talk it out or just like break up with them. But I feel like a lot of the reasons why I found myself unemployed, I found myself in a bad relationship, why I found myself plateauing was because I wasn't treating the real issue. A lot of things, like I was like exercising like crazy, eating really healthy because I read online that it would help. And it does for sure. But it felt like I was just stalling. It felt like I was just like putting off for another day. Like, I'll deal with it later. It wasn't until like I don't know if any of you know like my Twitter and like what I talk about, but I was invited to do like this ketamine therapy session, and that was like the only thing that actually helped me get over everything and just finally push past all the blockage and just move on with my life, I guess. So
is
like
it those pieces, like the light tower pieces?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one was really cool.
Yeah. I guess my point is there's like a lot of short-term coping things like exercising, hang out with friends, but I feel like in the end, every time I finished those like sessions and I came back, I just went right back to feeling like shit. The best way, I guess, is to obviously get help.
Wait, Brent, do you know about the ketamine therapy, or could you both kind of like explain it to us?
So the way that we think it works is that it's kind of a reset button. There has been therapies similar to that in the past. There's a therapy that uses electricity as kind of a reset button. That's been going on. It's just hard to get insurance to cover that kind of therapy. It's expensive. Insurance doesn't cover ketamine therapy either that I know of. But it's kind of a chemical version of the electricity. Just kind of it gives your brain that surge. It changes the ratios of neurotransmitters in the brain to kind of reset it.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that.
Are there side effects to it?
Oh, there's side effects to everything.
Yeah.
And it's a long list of side effects. But the thing with side effects is that they're required to list side effects if it happens to even just 0.1% of the test population. So the side effects are pretty rare. And most of the time, because the side effects are so unlikely and most of them are benign or not really harmful, the benefit of getting the medication it outweighs the risks.
Okay. How about you, Larry? How do you usually cope with this stuff?
Well, after Brent told me about it, I think I waited about a good 2 or 3 years being depressed until I actually did anything about it. I think at the time I avoided seeing the doctor to talk about depression because my personal family doctor actually knew my family, and they're a bunch of gossipy goose. So I didn't want them to be like, oh, I heard Larry's depressed. Also, at the time, I didn't really have insurance. And that's the big thing, like a lot of us don't have insurance, or we can't afford the treatment. So I avoided it for a long time. But after a certain point, I said, if I don't do anything about this, something bad's going to happen. So I got it. I went to a doctor. I got a doctor. I got treated. I got diagnosed. I got some medication. Unfortunately for me, I think I got a medication that did not work for me personally. It made me even more tired, and I just lost complete motivation to do a lot of things. Not even worse than depression, but I was like stagnant. And then there's a certain point where I got off the medication because I realized I couldn't afford the medication anymore. And that presented itself like a completely different set of problems where I was overly confident. And I felt so good. I felt so good, the complete opposite. Saying, oh, wow, I'm out of my depression. This is great, right? But if anything, it just made me into a more angry and antagonistic person where I was picking fights with everybody. And that's why I finally understood the term being off your meds meant. I felt so good. But then I realized that good feeling was a false sense of good feeling, where I realized, okay, there are things that are beyond my control. I don't know what to do about it. And thankfully, at the time, you unknowingly reached out to me to go out and go paint with the Warrior Painters. And I didn't think about it at the time. You, Angela, pestering me every weekend to come out to go paint. And I was like, oh,
That's style.
I know. And I went out and I paint. The funny thing is, like, a lot of times when you're depressed, you tend to hold yourself up in your room or your house and never go out. And then like that reinforced, at least to me, it reinforced the depression where like you're not solving anything. I didn't talk to anybody. Nobody recognized anything that I went through because up to this point, I was recognized as the really fun guy, right? There's one year I went to 10 weddings, and to some people's weddings that I didn't know.
Oh, I'm stressed out just hearing that.
Yeah, because they thought I was the guy who's going to start the party. And
well, you do that, so
I know
you can't blame them.
No, but I started dipping out of weddings where I'm like, why did they invite me to this wedding? I don't even know you. I don't want to go to this wedding. And then like I ran away, and that's when I recognized I had anxiety too, where like I was like, holy crap, I don't know how to deal with this. Anyway, going back on topic, going out, but for the right reasons, where it's like more helpful for myself in more relaxed state, and forcing myself to talk to people about it, right? I think especially being an Asian American, like there's a sense of shame to acknowledge that you're depressed. Because it's definitely a sign of weakness. I talked to my mom. She's like, don't be depressed. You've got to be a strong man. You got to be strong, son. Nobody likes to hear that you're sad. And I'm like, oh shit, she told me that for years. And like, you're impressionable when you're hearing these rules. Like if I tell people I'm depressed, they're gonna be like, ugh, So I guess I have this role that I had to fill where I'm fun Larry, and it exhausted me because that was a false front for me at the time where that really wasn't me. So when I went out and I was able, you introduced me to a bunch of new people, and that were non-judgmental, and it was just there for the focus of painting, being distracted by something, but in a positive way. It got me going in terms of my art. Like I started painting again. I hadn't painted in years at that point. I got to talk to people. It was really nice. Maybe in combination with me getting off the meds right at that point, I was very open with my depression to people. And in being really open with it, I was shocked to find out a lot of people who I didn't suspect went through the same things that I did. And it was so cathartic. And I was like, oh my God. And it's like, I didn't know you felt about this, Larry. I went through the same thing too. When you have depression, you start empathizing and you realize, I don't want anybody to go through this thing that I did. I realized that I shouldn't underestimate people's abilities to be compassionate. I think that's the fear, especially if you had one or two people telling me like, oh, that person's depressed. Oh, they're such a drag to be around. Don't let those people affect you. You gotta realize there's a lot more people can relate with you than those who will like kind of put you down or shame you for being depressed.
So, okay. How do you guys deal with it? Like, do you guys draw sometimes to feel better too? And also, how do you guys talk to people? Do you guys feel like it's easier to talk to artists so they could relate to you guys more?
The first question, how do I deal with it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, like, do you sometimes use art to help yourself feel better about it as well, or does it not help at all?
I find, well, actually, art does kind of help me. If I do art that's purely for myself, not for anything else, I do find that it helps me. It like brings me back to like the original reason why I liked it in the first place. So just doing things purely for myself. So like not drawing something to like post on Instagram later to make sure I get likes and make sure people remember me, you know, and not doing just like turning off the computer, going somewhere and just doodling, just like drawing whatever comes to my mind. Yeah, that really helps. I'm sorry, what was the second question?
Oh, so like, do you guys feel like talking to artists is better for a support group, or do you feel like talking to your family and friends is easier? Because like, I guess Larry did mention as an Asian American, sometimes it's really difficult to talk to your family about this. So do you have that similar experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh God. Yeah, no, I feel like the older generation of Asians definitely have like a huge stigma against mental illness. Like it doesn't matter what mental illness you have. They kind of treat it as if it was just one ugly monster. So you could just say that you're anxious, you have anxiety, and they'll treat you as if you have like really aggressive, violent schizophrenia. But it's like these are complete. Not that that's a bad thing, schizophrenia, but it's just like these are completely different things, and they all kind of group it into one thing because of like they don't know or they're not truly aware of what these things really are and how different they are. I think opening up to my mom about, well, I didn't really open up because my counselor at the time kind of broke confidentiality and just told her. But I remember having to tell her like that I was depressed, I was anxious, and she was like, "You don't, you just have allergies." And I was like, "What does that even mean?"
Holy shit! They said that. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I find that talking to family doesn't help because I feel like especially if they're like the type of people who like don't try to listen and think that like, oh, you're a child, you wouldn't understand, or like, oh, you just wouldn't understand, like they're never gonna listen. So I never really found solace or like comfort in talking to my family. But like because I grew up unable to like open up about a lot of things, I also find it hard to talk about my feelings with other people. So I feel like the only outlet for me is actually through art, which is kind of like a double whammy because it's like it comforts me, but at the same time stresses me out. So it's like, but I do find it very helpful and comforting because, you know, art in its essence is a way of communication. You know, like people draw art not just to make things pretty. Some people want to say something with it, which is what I do in my art. I like express a lot of what I'm feeling through what I draw, and a lot of people actually catch up on it, you know, which is actually really amazing. But a lot of people respond to it, and they can actually come to me, and we can almost have like a empathy and understanding without even really talking. And I find that like easiest way for me to like let out my emotions and let it be known to other people. Yeah.
For myself, in terms of being around artists, it's like I think you should be around artists, but you should be around the right kind of artists. And by that, what I mean is that you want to be around people who are positive influences. I find that being around really toxic influences can have a real effect on you. I think we have a tendency, or we've known people who been around people who are really judgmental about a person based on their artwork, and are openly critical, sometimes without context, right? Maybe as an up-and-coming artist, or artists who are not even to the skill level that's being criticized, you feel self-conscious about your work, because it's like, that person that you just said their art was shit, I'm not even that good. And it's like, oh, like, shit, I feel bad, and then so you start having this self-doubt. That's why, for me, as a personal philosophy, I will never talk bad about anybody's art, because I recognize people are at different levels. Of anything, I try to be encouraging. There's constructive criticism, but you want to surround yourself by artists who have a more positive mentality, seeing that there's room for improvement. I mean, that's why, Angela, you were encouraging me so much, even though I had
was
so
just
much
being a tiger mom. I wasn't encouraging you.
Yeah, well, you encouraged me, even though, like, I said, like, I'm never work again, or like, what's the point? But then, like, I think you need that push by people that kind of care for you. So I would say that the toxic people, they gain like self-confidence by putting other people down.
That is so true.
Yeah, it's very contagious. If you're around somebody like that, somebody's gonna think, okay, well, this is how artists are supposed to treat each other.
It's just like what Catherine said earlier, how in her college, like Art Center is very much like that, where I feel like they train you to be competitive rather than supportive. Mm-hmm. And I think that was one reason why I had such a difficult time liking Art Center. And I think I needed a long time to get rid of that mentality to be healthier mentally. It was a struggle for me. And I think what you say is right. It's a really good advice. But so Brent, can I ask you a question about like...
No.
Okay. So you do have a lot of artist friends that you care about and that you help with depression, right? How do you usually go about helping them?
Recognition of the problem is the first step. It's an essential step. We could throw all the treatments at you, millions of dollars. If you don't recognize that there's a problem, there's really no benefit for you. Helping the people around me, as a physician, that kind of comes with my job. Like outside the clinic, it's about listening and being receptive and not being judgy. Too often I hear people tell me, oh yeah, I tried to talk to my friend or my mom or family member about this, and they said, what are you so depressed about? Your life is good. There's absolutely nothing to be sad about. And that's the exact wrong thing to say. Because depression doesn't care how much money you have. Depression doesn't care how many awards you've won or what your job is. It's going to hit you in any phase of your life. And just be understanding and to be receptive to that is really essential.
I have a feeling that like every time I hit my goal, I feel happy for like 2 months, but then afterwards I go back to feeling like shit again. I don't know if you guys feel that. Like Catherine, I know you worked with like New York Times and a lot of really big name editorial places, but like, do you feel like every time you get it, you're so happy, but afterwards it just goes back to being sad? Like, why do you think we feel like that?
I feel like, I can only speak for myself here, but I feel like my parents kind of always pushed me to strive for more, but their method of doing so wasn't the most healthy, I don't think. Like, they were always like, oh, I would come home with, like, let's say, an A- on a test. And they're like, why didn't you get an A+? It's like classic Asian traits, mean stuff. But I feel like that inadvertently you kind of like internalize it, and you inadvertently say that to yourself later on. You take what your parents told you and you kind of like treat yourself the same way. So like every time I like get an award or I like pass a career milestone, I think great, but I'm like, but this isn't enough. I need to do more. Like, what is this? This, and I always compare myself to other people who like are even better than me or something. And I just always feel inadequate, I guess, because I feel like the inadequacy was already planted when I was young. Those thoughts are kind of hard to like overcome. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, especially if you're depressed, it also adds to the like, oh, everything's meaningless. So it's like after I get an award, after I reach a career milestone, you just realize, well, what was the point of that? There was like no fireworks, no nothing. Nothing was added to my life in terms of like happiness. Mm-hmm. It was just like another pointless thing I can put on my resume, which is kind of sad to think about, but yeah.
Oh, I can so relate right now. How about you, Larry? Do you have that feeling?
I don't know, like the small like dopamine hits of validation you get when you get these small compliments, they're great. The cycle, for me at least, it goes up and down, right? And I think a lot of people, at least myself, at times, you want to seek that validation through social media, through these likes, and like like as much as you want to deny, oh, these points, these things are meaningless. You get that small dopamine hit when somebody likes you, or you get a lot. It just feels good. You're like, oh, give it to me, give it to me. Once that kind of goes away, you kind of feel like shit. And you have to recognize that doesn't tie into your self-worth, especially when you're presenting something that you might have poured your heart into and then nobody responds. I have to learn to separate that as a separate entity and not intertwine with my self-worth, because a lot of these people who like myself, that's cool, I appreciate that, but that doesn't necessarily make me a better artist. It might inspire me, but like I realize a lot of the times it's just self-motivation and wanting to, like Catherine said, doing things that are more so for yourself. And I find that if I'm doing things to please people, it gets exhausting. It becomes work in a way.
So okay, wait. Then how are you guys able to separate yourself from your art? Because like you guys said, we're not just. I think Michelle mentioned this in the previous episode, how we're not just the art we make. Do you guys have like any tips on how you guys could like separate the two? Because it's so hard, right? We're so intertwined with our art. It's really difficult to not judge our self-worth based off of our like artistic value.
For me, I just, because it's something I create, I just compare it to, like, let's say my cooking. If my cooking turns out bad, I'm not gonna beat myself up for it. Or it's like if I don't know, if I decide one day I decided to like fashion design and it looks like crap, it's like I'm not gonna be like, oh, that's it for me. I need to like kind of see it for what it is. It's just something I make. It's just a hobby. It's just like an action. Just like how cooking is, just like how biking and running is. It's just something that you do. It doesn't define you. It's just an action that you do that is separate from yourself. That's how I have to remind myself. Yeah.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. For me, sometimes I purposely leave my phone in the other room. For me, sometimes when you're just putting aside that noise and just doing things for yourself and not being distracted, it's like you're just focusing yourself and not caring about what other people think or how people are responding, because that dictates what your content will be. So like I do sometimes do social media cleanses where I like purposely deactivate my Facebook. I give my password to somebody else, not being distracted by social media, but actually having outlets like this where we're kind of talking with other people, having actual real conversations that go back and forth in real time. That distracts me. That allows me to be myself a little bit more and produce more genuine artwork. And
so it seems like both you and Catherine are basically saying the same thing, where when you guys are doing art, it should just be for yourself. And then I guess just view it as something that's pleasurable rather than something that's just you. Is that what you both are kind of saying right now?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. For yourself, for your own mental health.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys give yourself that constant motivation to get better? Because I feel like art is a constant torture for yourself, because you go through that cycle and spiral of feeling really shitty, feeling really good, and then it just keeps like turning like that. How do you guys deal with that?
For me, I need to like write down this goal that I have for myself. And I just need to constantly remind myself of that goal. And that goal for me is that I want to find fulfillment in my career, like my own personal fulfillment, not just like money or rewards. I just want to like feel like I contributed something to like society, I guess. And I just need to constantly remind myself of that for me to get my motivation back up. Yeah. In the end, I have to remind myself that this is for me. I'm not doing this for anybody else, and I'm only doing this for myself and like my own goals and desires.
How about you, Larry?
I'm very lucky, fortunate that at this point, my friends who know that I have depression reach out to me. Kind of nice to know that somebody has your back. My outlet, being a natural extrovert, is just talking to people. And I think if the more I let things out, the more I'm able to convey things that I bottle up, I think the more it pushes me away from falling into that depression.
Cool. All right. So Brent, then I wanted to spend the last 4 minutes with you, asking you if you have any recommendations for artists who don't have funds to seek a therapist. What would be some advice that you'd give them?
There are a few things that you can do that doesn't cost any money. So we know that regular exercise does help. Now, it is difficult because, a lot of times you don't have motivation to do anything. So getting the motivation to exercise on a regular basis can be a challenge, but we do know that that does help. We also know that light helps, sunlight. Some people with depression go through phototherapy. They have lights that are full spectrum, and that helps with the mood because it kind of mimics the regular sunlight. And it helps a lot also with people whose depression is more environmental, where it tends to occur more like when the sun is down. So getting sun, getting regular exercises, those things will help. You also want to take some time to think about and list what your triggers are. So everyone has triggers, and anything can be a trigger, whether it be a person or workplace. Sometimes just a room in the house can be a trigger for you. If you spend a lot of time being depressed in a room in your house, let's say your bedroom, you start to associate the bedroom with the depression. So you may not be depressed, but the moment you step into the bedroom, there you are, because that's the association. It could be an association with a certain season. It could be spring, it could be winter, or it could be an association with an event like the anniversary of a death. Those things can trigger. So you want to be mindful of those triggers and kind of plan to be away from them. For example, if you find that you're depressed and you recognize that it's because of a certain place, for example, a room in your house, spend some time away. Spend a couple of days somewhere else to kind of reset everything and get rid of that association. Also, this is not for everybody, but I've had a lot of patients forego counseling and medication because they wanted to try religion instead. They said that they have a church, and after a few weeks, they come back to me and say, "Yeah, I started going back to church, talking to the people over there. They're really helpful. I don't think I need medicine. I don't think I need counseling. I think I'm good." So, seek that out too as an option. There are free or affordable counseling resources online. And I think what I'm going to do is if maybe Kim could compile that list and send a link to everybody, because she has a pretty good list of resources online, including one that's like our AI. It's like a robot.
Oh, she
just
told me
talks to you.
Wobot, right?
Yeah, Wobot. Yeah. So, just try it.
Okay. I guess this concludes the talking part. So are you guys ready for some questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Woo. Okay. How to keep making art when an episode comes on? I could say for myself, I just push through because I'm a stubborn biatch, but it sometimes makes me feel worse after, or it can make me feel better. But how about you guys?
I find that pushing through usually makes me feel worse. Yeah, because it's kind of like forcing myself to keep going, even though I have nothing left for me to keep going with. Like I have no more energy. So at that point, I'm just like exhausting myself out even more. But I feel like just reminding myself of like the end goal usually helps, that there is an end in sight and it's finishing the project.
That's actually a good way to think. Well, okay, then Brent, this next question is for you. Somebody asked, would you recommend people in our profession to seek counseling regardless of their mental state?
What I would recommend is that you do one of the readings first, like the PHQ or the GAD, just to kind of get an idea, because the resources for mental health are already pretty thin. Because if all artists did it, then the industry would just be overwhelmed. And we want to reserve those resources for people who really need it. But chances are, if you're already thinking that maybe you probably should. So that's kind of what I'm getting from that question. But if you're feeling fine, then do the self-evaluation and just kind of go from there.
And someone had an add-on question. They are on medication, but they're wondering if counseling or therapy is also needed for treatment, and how does therapy specifically help?
So based on the studies, the combination of medicine and therapy work better than either one alone. So we do recommend both. Best way to go. How does counseling help? It helps mainly to identify the problem identify the triggers, and to hopefully change your perspective, and also lead you into healthy coping mechanisms. So it's kind of like, because you can overcome depression on your own. So the mind is a powerful thing. There's plenty of people who don't need any help. They just kind of work on it on their own. They're very lucky. And what the therapist will do is kind of help your own mind work through, right? So a lot of times it takes a third party to put things in place for you so that you can see. Because when you're in the depression, when you're in the anxiety, you're in your little bubble, okay, and nothing else matters except what's inside your mind right now. And having a third party, talking to a third party, kind of helps break you out of that and helps you start looking from the outside in.
All right, thank you. On to the next question. People often are not sure how to reach out and what to do when they see their friends are dealing with depression. Do you have some suggestions, big or small, on what you find helpful?
I think it's just reaching out. When you see that somebody's really sad, even though they might be reluctant, I would just say to reach out to them to say see how they're doing, and not necessarily, hey, are you depressed? Just like, hey, how are you doing? Something as simple as that, just checking in on them, just having them talk about it, and then you just kind of slowly segue into like, how you feeling, and then like a lot of times, how I manage to get people who are depressed to open up is to talk about my own experience with it, which makes them, when you point out a fact that makes it sort of relatable, especially for a person who's maybe in denial that they have depression. For the most part, I think they've appreciated that. But this is just all anecdotal experiences. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like while it is hard to like reach out to people who are depressed, I think just like letting them know that whenever they're ready, they can talk to me. Reminding them that I'll always be there for them. Just like a nice like reminder in general to like know that if anything ever does go sour, if anything ever does come to a point where I really do need to talk to someone, like someone will always be there. To me, that's like the most helpful thing. I mean, the talk is very helpful. Them sitting me down and like talking to me is also very helpful. But the most comforting thing is knowing that I will always have someone to talk to. So like, I know a lot of people when they're depressed, they don't really want to talk about it at the moment, especially for like introverts or people who are just really anxious. Like they really don't want to open up because they either feel like that the person is either going to break their trust, like I guess how other people have done in the past, or they're not going to take them seriously or whatever. Giving them the space to talk, I think, is what is most helpful.
The next question is, Angela, you do so much personal work. How do you feel when you're painting? What's the motivation? So I briefly talked about this earlier, but I push myself really hard and sometimes I burn out and then I crash really hard. I don't recommend doing that. My motivation is having a farm in Spain with Kaylee, and we're raising our piggies and painting on the ranch. So I guess it's kind of similar to how Catherine approaches it, where I do have an end goal in mind. And I think once I hit it, hopefully I'll be happy and I'll never have to work and paint for money again. So that's my motivation. Okay. This is a really good question that someone wants to ask you guys. What steps do you guys actively take to rediscover the fun and passion you have in art when you're also thinking about it as your job?
I know for like editorial, for example, it's just loads of article about politics, and it could be like the most mundane thing ever. So I just always try to remember, like my whole thing is that I create work for myself that I find fun. And like sometimes the assignments aren't fun and they're mundane and the art director is like horrible and won't let you do anything. So I just always just try to find something to make it enjoyable. Whether it's like the colors or like the composition or just like trying a new technique, I'll just like try to find that small thing to just make it not so horrible, the experience overall, and just, try to get myself through it. Yeah.
As for me, I find that doing a art type that you're not normally used to, just to change it up a little bit, might help. Not to promote this group so much, but going out and doing the plein air painting, something I never really thought about doing it, or thought that I had an interest doing, really inspired me. And it's something like I don't earn an income from, but it's a nice getaway any type of art, as long as you're working those muscles and being creative, it's inspirational and it translates to the other aspects of your art that your main type of art.
The next one is for all three of you guys. In my family, there is a cultural stigma against depression and mental illness. Do you have any advice on dealing with things like this? Brent, since you treated a lot of Latinos, could you also share your experience about that?
Yeah, don't talk to your family members about your depression. It's not helpful. Like because they're just
serious. Okay.
Yeah, I am very serious, because they're just going to keep dismissing it and dismissing it and dismissing it, and you're going to spiral down. And it's very difficult sometimes when you live with them and there's no way for you to get out. It gets pretty tricky, but you need to look at other options, whether it be friends, outside counseling. You got to look elsewhere. You can love your family and not talk to them about your depression at the same time. That doesn't mean you don't love them.
How I kind of dealt with it at the time, like my parents are divorced, so I only have a good relationship with my mom. I remember finding this comic about a person illustrating into the simplest form in a formal comic how they recognized that they were depressed. And it's kind of silly, but I shared that with my mom. English is not her first language, but then it was simple enough for her to read and go through it. I was like, Mom, I want you to read this comic. And she read through it and she was like, oh my God, I go through that sometimes. And so, it's kind of a crapshoot. Sometimes you have parents who are understanding, who can process things. I had a mom who tells me to man up and just be a man because nobody wants to be with somebody who's sad all the time. I mean, she still thinks that from time to time, but then having her kind of recognize and come to terms that she has a son that is going through depression, it made her a little bit more empathetic in the short run. That it's helpful. And I told her, Mom, sometimes I need a break from the constant pressure that you have, and you telling me just don't be sad. It doesn't work for me. If anything, that makes it worse. On that end, I think that I provided some basic guidelines for her that was helpful for me in giving me my space and understanding what sort of not to say. That kind of worked out for me.
Yeah, going off of what Brett said, I feel like if your parents aren't supportive and they're stubborn about it, then you have to look elsewhere. They're not really something you can control. It's like a total external thing. So if you can't control how they behave and how they act towards you, I guess you just have to control where you go look for comfort. I mean, I said my mom thought I had allergies. So she wasn't the source of comfort here. But yeah, you just have to look elsewhere. It's just like trying to convince a brick wall to move for you. They're not going to do it. Yeah. It sucks, and I'm really sorry. But I feel like just for your own personal benefit, sometimes you just need to move past it.
So Larry, you're really lucky. Cherish that. Yeah. Okay, so the next one is someone says, I've had problems of gravitating towards negativity in the past and being uncomfortable with positivity or even being able to take a compliment. Been getting better at it in recent years, but do you have any thoughts about how to get out of that mode?
I find that your thoughts and your emotions are two separate things, but they go hand in hand. If you have negative thoughts all the time, that will affect your emotions, obviously. So what I try to do is actually force myself to tell myself positive things. You can do this, you got this, don't worry. I might not believe it, but just hearing it kind of affects my mood differently. If I keep telling myself, this isn't going to work, this is a dead end, I'm going to fail, that's obviously going to affect my mood as well. But hearing these words, even if I don't believe it, it also affects me in a way, subconsciously in a way that I feel like maybe there is a way for me to get over this. And in terms of being uncomfortable with compliments and stuff, I had this really horrible thing in college where I when people compliment me, I would do this whole little shebang show where I'm just no. Now I just suck up and take it thanks. It's sort of better for everybody. Just say thank you and move on. Yeah.
How about you, Larry?
I think I have a bad habit of, to this day, accepting compliments from people because I think there's a certain aspect of yourself that questions yourself, and it's the imposter syndrome, right? And also you're questioning them if they're disingenuous because you're going to get these feelings. Just like Catherine, when somebody compliments me these days, I'll be oh, thanks, just simple as something as that.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I mean, I used to have problems with that too. I think I was similar to no, that was so bad. Oh, and then I would make this whole scene about it. But yeah, I'm trying really hard to say thank you and then not make it seem like I'm cocky or like arrogant about it. So, but it's hard. Totally get it. I guess this is more for you, Brent. Recently, I took the Myers-Briggs test again, and I found out that I'm an INFP. I don't know what INFP is. So
I
they
do.
tend to, okay, they tend to have mood swings. It confuses me if it's actually anxiety or if it's just the personality.
It's very difficult to distinguish. And what you want to go by is how it affects your life. Because these feelings of sadness and anxiety, these are all very natural. These are normal. It becomes abnormal when it starts to affect your life in certain ways. So if it starts to affect your mood in a way where your relationships with other people are starting to degrade, whether it be because of agitation or distancing yourself, that's a red flag. If your productivity at work is taking a hit, that's a red flag. So mood swings, that's a natural part of life, as long as it's not affecting your relationships with other people and your work. Just let it be.
Do you guys have any advice to get over it and seek help, even if you're really shy about it? Talking about these things makes me really anxious, somebody asked.
Yeah, being an introvert, like talking about anything makes me anxious. Sometimes you just have to suck it up and do it for your own benefit. Because if you don't, you're just gonna spiral into something worse. Or you can have someone else force you to do it. No,
Yeah, like me and Larry.
And I would like just to say, coming as an extrovert, one thing I had to learn is to be more understanding of introverted people, because they deal with depression sometimes in a very different way. Just be there to listen more and not force them to do things from your perspective.
Whoops, sorry, Larry. Okay, so the next question is,
Sorry, Angela.
the cycle of being happy for a while and falling back to being sad is vicious. This person actually found themselves being reluctant to be happy because of that, because they're afraid that it's going to be followed by the downfall. How do you guys overcome this?
you will have bad emotions, just as you will have happy emotions. And it's not a matter of trying to get rid of the bad emotions, rather just trying to accept them. Just allow it to happen and feel it, and then just move on towards the direction that you want to go. I guess that's how I find it helpful.
I talked to my therapist actually about this, because I have that that issue is really bad for me actually, and she says that it's probably because I had a really bad and traumatic childhood, so I constantly fear that if something good happens, something bad will immediately follows. So to the person who asked this question, maybe for you, you need to think about if you had any past experience that really traumatized you, and try to like forgive yourself for that thought, and then that period of your life. Because I found that once I went back to talk to myself and forgive myself, it really helped me overcome this emotion a lot better. Do you guys ever feel like your depression or anxiety will ever lift? I feel like it will never go. It's like what you said, Catherine, it'll just come and go. We'll just have to take it a day at a time and face those bad emotions as they come.
Yeah, maybe once when I'm rich, I'll get a therapist. But for now, I think it's just a permanent thing. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But I find, like, as I said, just accepting it and then trying my best to live the life that I want to live, I find that the most helpful. Yeah.
Another person asked, I think I'll be happy when I achieve this particular goal, but when after reaching, I just feel like that's all. That didn't make me feel happy for a while. So I guess happiness should really be internal. How do we try to attain that? That's a really deep question.
That's a very personal question. It's different for everybody. And I felt the same way when I was in medical school. I said to myself, well, once I finish medical school, I'll be happy. Well, I wasn't. And then I went through residency, and I said, once I finish residency and start working as a real doctor, I'll be happy. No, I wasn't. So I started working my first job and realized I'm not happy here either, and started earning all this money. And it's just we can't keep waiting for happiness to happen, because there are people who are happy in every stage of life, right? And I go to the Philippines, and I see people there living in huts. Little kids wearing nothing but shorts. They're barefoot on the ground playing with an empty can. They're happy. So why am I not happy when I have all these possessions. So that's a deep personal question to ask yourself, and I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like a lot of what we decide makes us happy, like having a job, having a car, having money, do those things really make us happy? Is it money that makes us happy, or is it just being able to live comfortably? I feel like we often attribute happiness with the wrong things. We attribute with things that don't actually give us happiness. We need to like look inside, I guess, and like really try to pinpoint the real source of like happiness, I guess, from your own self. If like money didn't exist, if like judgment didn't exist, if society didn't exist, like what would make you happy? That's the question I asked myself when I was like in that ketamine therapy. I asked myself, like, without money, without jobs, without social media, like what is it that I want? And that is the thing that makes me happy.
That's good. I think I'm very similar to what Brent and Kat said. So I think you guys just need to ask yourself, besides all this stuff that's meant to distract us, is there anything that you really want to achieve for yourself? For me, I just want to become a painter on a barn and not have to worry about money. So just think about it. And I think you guys could really figure it out. We're kind of out of time right now, but do you guys have anything you want to add to like encourage people or to talk about like last thoughts on your mental illness?
I think I'm much better equipped to deal with it nowadays than I did before when I didn't recognize it. So I think for anybody facing it like I did, just, we don't have all the answers, but hopefully what the experience we shared was informative, and just try it out. And I feel like I can not necessarily overcome it, but, I can defeat it for now, for the time being, and not know what to do and not be ashamed of myself.
Yeah, I think that it's super difficult and it really blinds you from seeing like your real goal. But just I hope that this doesn't sound too corny and too like preachy, but like there is a possibility for things to get better. And you are also in charge of taking yourself there. Like nobody's gonna swoop down and help you, you gotta also help yourself. Yeah, that's all I gotta say about it.
I just wanted to say that I am working from home and have a lot of free time, so I'm available. So and I'm serious about this. Any way I can help, just go through Discord. The message will be passed along to me eventually through you guys or Kim, but I'm here to help.
Well, thank you guys so much. I think it was really even helpful for me and really motivational. And I'm glad I'm not alone in my depression. Thank you guys for opening up to everyone, and we really appreciate it.
Thank
Cool.
you. Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you have any suggestions, please leave your comments on whichever platform you are listening with. And if you like this podcast and other events we organize, please consider donating to us on Gumroad. You'll find a link in the description. Thank you and hope to see you again soon.